Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our Chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the Johnson edition of all 1,775 poems of Emily Dickinson. We turn now to poem 105, To Hang Our Head Ostensibly. Now, it's interesting in the Johnson edition, we've gone through kind of 4 poems that are fairly obvious, they're fairly accessible, they're fairly straightforward. And now we're going to hit this, to use Emily's language, dense poem. This is another one of those dense poems. Now, by dense here we mean possibly convoluted, complicated. It's not altogether clear exactly what Emily is referencing, and yet in some ways it's going to be crystal clear what her actual concerns are. I think dense is the key word of this poem. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already been exposed to our introductory set of comments as well as the previous 104 poems, because we begin to get a sense as you read through all these poems that one of the chief concerns for Emily is acceptance and understanding. As any great artist, she obviously is so tuned into her craft that she can't believe that it's going to be difficult for anyone to not appreciate the level of passion energy that she brings to the text. Now, the great scholar Ruth Miller has pointed out that this may be a poem about Emily and Samuel Boyles, who we've commented on a number of times already, and his inability to maybe appreciate her poems, that, you know, they're in this ongoing discussion. The idea that Miller will provide is that Boyles will use the world standards in his Springfield Republican. He wrote it this way, quote, "Now in the flower season, let us welcome the kindred flowers of poetry and romance, and never idly fancy the time is lost that is spent in their enjoyment," end quote. Well, it's not that Emily's not interested in flowers. I mean, the next poem will in fact involve a daisy. However, as we've said so many times, Emily's stuff always seems to move from the simple to the complex, like most great romantic poets. And so she's always playing that game of, can you get it? And there seems to be a suggestion that maybe early on, when Samuel Boyles critiqued her stuff, that she just accepted it. She'll call it hanging her head. I want you to pay attention as well to the pronouns here, especially of our and you, because that's going to be significant in our reading of this. To hang our head ostensibly and subsequent, to find that such was not the posture of our immortal mind, affords the sly presumption that in so dense a fuzz, you, too, take cobweb attitudes upon a plane of gauze. Now, I love all the S and Z sounds, of course, faw's and gauze and all of that. So this is a fun poem to read out loud. And this is one of those little poems that I love in the collection of Emily's poetry, because you can read beneath the epidermis, as she is suggesting, without the cobweb attitudes and the plane of gauze. I love that. I love the way that she'll play that game of epidermis. Notice, she'll begin, first of all, with this to construction. It's going to be to hang, to find. Watch. To hang our head. By the way, when we get to poem 239, we're going to play a similar game of this use of the word hang. Heaven is what I cannot reach, the apple on the tree, provided it do hopeless hang, that heaven is to me. This idea of hanging, or is this going to be about shaming, maybe, to hang our head? And then she uses the word ostensibly, and here the S sounds with ostensible and subsequent, right? The brilliance of putting those two words so close together. We're going to see this word ostensibly used only one other time in poem 1123. And when we meet in that poem, it will read like this. The mind was built for mighty freight, for dread occasion planned, how often foundering at sea, ostensibly on land. This idea of perpetuality, this idea of potentiality is all contained within ostensible. And subsequent, in other words, everything seems to follow. Let's use the word subsequent to understand Emily's poetry. Everything has its place. Everything follows. So she says to hang our head ostensibly and subsequent, to find, the second of these two constructions, to hang, to find that such was not the posture of our immortal mind. It is altogether possible that Miller's right in her critique of this poem, that what Emily is saying is, maybe Sam Boyles is right, that my stuff was not that deep, dense will be her word in a moment here. But that in fact there's something important maybe going on, and my immortal mind knew it, right? There was something I knew that was going on. Again, notice the word our used twice. And then the stanza break. That attitude affords the sly presumption. I am interested in this word of the use of the word sly. This is the only time in all of Emily's poetry that she uses this word. And in this way. Sly. In other words, witty. Maybe we could argue that if there's one great word for Emily, it is this word, sly. You don't see it coming. How many of us have started reading these poems and now we're 105 in and we go, you know, there's something going on here that at first glance I just did not see. And I think Emily would be very pleased that we might say something about her poetry from this side. Affords the sly presumption that in so dense a fuzz, the only other use of the word fuzz is in poem 1405. I'm fascinated by this use of the word in 1405. Well, when we get there later on, we'll remind ourselves that we were here. Bees are black. We'll jump down to the end. Ride abroad in ostentation and subsist on fuzz. Fuzz ordained, not fuzz contingent. Morrows of the hill, jugs a universe's fracture could not jaw or spill. This idea of fuzz, here, of course, this use of the word dense, a fuzz can have any number of meanings. She could be, of course, saying that her words are fuzzy as in unclear, certainly. And then the use of the word you. Who is this you that she's saying? Notice we go from our to you. It could be Sam Boyles, it could be Emily. You, too, take cobweb attitudes. Now, we're going to see cobweb when we meet poems 187, 398, 997. I'll let you run your study to ground there. I love cobweb attitudes as a phrase. Up on a plane of gauze. Now, this idea of the surface, the epidermis, right, for gauze. Well, we're going to use this word gauze in poems 263, 326, 916, and 928. Again, I'll let you study her use of that. Well, and notice the exclamation point at the end. Well, what is exactly going on here? I think at 2a, the argument that she's making is that the artist longs for acceptance, understanding, not worrying about the surface, the epidermal, to get beneath the gauze, to get beneath and through the cobwebs, past the fuzz. That's what all artists long for. And I think Emily very much longed for this. At 2b, I love the pronouns our and you. Who is this our and you? Is it Samuel Boyles? Could be. Notice the capitalization, right? We haven't said a lot about this, but Emily will sometimes capitalize certain words like cobweb and gauze here. And I think that's significant. It's kind of surprising she didn't capitalize fuzz as well, huh? At 3a, well, when we get to poem 441, many argue that's the first poem that should always be studied in a study of Emily Dickinson. This is my letter to the world that never wrote to me. The end of that, judge tenderly of me. In other words, I'm hopeful that you will accept my stuff and not be too critical of it. Here, of course, maybe a similar game's being played. When we think about the cause at 3a, when we think about the cause of the hope for acceptance, I like to think about Milton's Sonnet 7 and How Soon Hath Time, as well as Sonnet 19, When I Consider My Light Is Spent. I've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. You can run those lectures to ground. I think Milton had a similar longing, as of course did all great poets. We think of Walt Whitman in our Talks with Walt, our previous series before we came to Chats with Emily, where we commented there that Whitman, much like Milton, was longing to be heard, to be accepted, to be understood. Can you please go beneath the epidermis? Can you please figure out this cobweb of attitudes, to be able to get to something real? That's what the longing is. Finally, at 3b, how can we own a poem like this? Well, how about you? What was a time that you wished that someone could go beneath the epidermis, the surface, and really get you, really understand you? And to what degree are you beginning to understand Emily? I hope we're 100 poems in plus. I hope that you are. Thank you.